After our date night, my wife had my best friend over and stayed up with him until 3 a.m. When I voiced my frustration, she gave me the cold shoulder. Now he's saying they were married in another life. You're about to dive into a story full of real emotions and surprising twists. If you don't want to miss future videos, be sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned. My wife and I usually enjoy a harmonious relationship. However, last night revealed a surprising twist. She has been silently protesting through a sex strike for the better part of the last month, a response to some remarks I made after our previous date night about a month ago. To give some context, I take it upon myself to organize a monthly date night for us. I handle everything from booking a nice dinner spot and arranging childcare for our 3 children to ensuring they are fed before we leave. This allows my wife the luxury of simply enjoying the evening. Normally, after dinner, we might grab drinks, sometimes with friends or just the 2 of us. This month, I planned a delightful evening that concluded with an excellent dinner. Post-dinner, I suggested we visit a wine bar nearby. However, my wife, after coordinating with a friend via text, proposed we meet another couple for drinks instead. I agreed, and we headed to a bar they recommended. Unfortunately, our friend's dinner ended later than expected, and the wife, feeling exhausted, opted to head home. Her husband dropped her off and then joined us at the bar. By 11:45 p.m., we needed to leave to get back for our babysitter. My wife, still enjoying the night, invited our friend to our house for another round of drink. I was okay with the plan, but mentioned I hope to be in bed by 1 a.m. since I handle our children's morning routine and they wake up early. My wife assured me we'd stick to the timeline. We enjoyed some wine and music at home. However, when 1 a.m. rolled around and our friends started to leave, my wife insisted we continue the night. After lingering for another 10 minutes, I was too tired to stay up and excused myself. My wife said she'd follow shortly. I prepared for bed, but by the time I was done, she hadn't appeared, so I went to sleep alone. At around 3 a.m., I was abruptly awakened by the sound of my wife returning to our bedroom. She had had a bit too much to drink and wasn't exactly quiet about her. Once awake, it's usually hard for me to fall back asleep, and that night was no exception. I didn't manage to drift off until about 5 a.m., just an hour and a half before our children were up at 6:30. Since I was already wide awake, I tentatively broached the topic of intimacy, though I admit it wasn't framed in the most romantic manner. She declined, citing her tiredness, and quickly fell asleep, while I lay there, unable to sleep, stewing over both the disruption and the overall direction the evening had taken. In a moment of frustration, I sent her a text while she slept, expressing that I felt hurt by how the evening concluded, particularly that after organizing a thoughtful evening, it seemed to end with her preferring the company of others to winding down together. I emphasized that I trusted nothing inappropriate happened. They were merely chatting and enjoying music. The next morning, she apologized for the night before, but I blundered by, voicing my reluctance to plan future elaborate date nights. I pointed out her broken promise about our bedtime, which not only ruined my sleep, but was becoming a recurring issue on our date night. Moreover, I perhaps insensitively remarked that our last few dates hadn't ended intimately, which to me felt like an essential culmination of a romantic evening. I even mentioned feeling abandoned at the end of the night. These comments deeply hurt her. She felt reduced to being valued only for sex. She argued that date nights should center on enjoyment and companionship, not expectations of sex. While I understand and appreciate her perspective on valuing time spent together, I also can't help but feel disappointed, especially given the recurring pattern and the night's abrupt end. Reddit, I'd love your perspective on this situation. Additional details have emerged given the unexpected traction this post has received. Here are some responses to frequently asked questions. One involving friends on date night wasn't originally part of the plan. However, my wife suggested it, and I agreed because I wanted to make her happy, even though it deviated from my initial plan. 2, regarding our sexual frequency, we typically manage 2 to 3 times a week, which I think is reasonable given we have 3 young children. The frequency can be sporadic. Sometimes it's 5 times in 1 week and just once the next. I strive to be attentive and prioritize her pleasure, often ensuring she reaches satisfaction first, unless she prefers a quicker encounter. 3 A's for not realizing the ongoing sex strike. There were a few coincidental interruptions. I had initially paused my advances for a week to show that my interest in her wasn't solely sexual. Right after, I contracted a severe case of COVID, followed by her menstrual cycle, and then a family trip made intimacy challenging. These disruptions inadvertently masked her intentional withholding. Despite this, there were occasions she initiated, which she referred to as moments of weakness. 4, we have experienced extended periods without sex in the past due to childbirth, surgeries, and bouts of depression. These experiences have shown that our relationship can withstand challenges, and I am committed to supporting her through thick and thin. 5, concerning the late nights with a male friend, it's quite typical for us. We're very close with this couple, and they often visit our home at least once a week. The husband is a good friend to both of us. His wife has early morning commitments, which means he often spends evenings with us engaging in activities like drinking, playing board games, listening to music, and playing guitar. 6, it's not unusual for him to stay late at our house because we tend to stay up later than his wife does. The only reason it was problematic this time was that it happened on what was supposed to be our date night. Nevertheless, he is a trustworthy individual and probably the safest male friend for my wife to spend time with. The situation may appear questionable from an outsider's perspective, but knowing the people involved reassures me that nothing inappropriate occurred. I trust that our friend only planned to stop by briefly for a drink. He even tried to leave at one point and had called an Uber, but my wife impulsively canceled it, believing they merely lost track of time. Additionally, a power outage had occurred the day before, which disrupted our living room clock, contributing to their skewed perception of time. Regarding the other 3 date nights, one night after a pleasant dinner, we joined a large group of friends at a bar. As the night extended, someone needed to head home for the babysitter, so I volunteered, allowing her to continue enjoying the evening with our friends. She stayed out until past 3 a.m. and returned quite intoxicated, requiring my assistance to get to bed, which ended our night. On another occasion, a trivial disagreement during dinner soured the mood for the rest of the evening. And on a third, by the time we returned home, she was simply too exhausted to stay up, opting to go to bed immediately, a decision I fully respected without any objection. These incidents highlight not a pattern of neglect, but rather the frustrating interplay of circumstances that often derail our plans for the ideal date night. As for why my wife often stays up late, she naturally tends towards being a night owl. Her perfect day would involve staying up until around 1 or 2 a.m. and then sleeping in until 9 a.m., especially on weekends when she's having fun. In the past, we've discussed this, and she acknowledges her tendency to not want to end the night early. I've even proposed staying up late with her if she would take on the morning duties the next day, but she has consistently declined, feeling it wouldn't provide her enough rest. Regarding our division of labor, I work a high-paying job with long hours, which demands significant time away from home, while my wife is a stay-at-home mom. This arrangement means that while I'm at work, she is primarily responsible for the children's day-to-day care. This division, though not without its challenges, generally works for our family structure. When I'm not working, the division of household labor shifts considerably. I handle around 60%, and my wife manages the remaining 40%. I tend to take on more responsibilities with our children when I'm home, as I know firsthand how exhausting managing 3 young kids can be, and I appreciate giving her a break. Notably, I take charge of the morning duties, which we both agree are the most challenging. My wife is very grateful for my contributions around the house and has openly acknowledged that I do more in this regard than any of our male friends. This mutual recognition and appreciation help maintain a positive dynamic in our relationship. As for her role as a mother, she is truly exemplary. She invests a tremendous amount of energy into creating a joyful and enchanting environment for our children. Her dedication makes her a favorite among their friends too. Her enthusiasm in parenting likely contributes to her desire to enjoy her free time to the fullest, sometimes staying out later than might be ideal. Outside of household duties, our relationship thrives on mutual thoughtfulness. I start her day by making coffee and leaving a note next to her mug, and she reciprocates by assisting my mom with technical issues, a task not for the faint of heart. I often bring her flowers and surprise her with small gifts, whereas she opts for less frequent but more substantial and considerate gifts. If we set aside the complications in our sexual relationship, our marriage is strong and fulfilling. It was only until recently that I would have also praised our intimate life. However, past disagreements about sex, including a significant argument about our lack of intimacy during vacations, which led to a month-long hiatus, have occasionally strained our connection. We travel quite a bit, around 10 trips annually, many of which are just long weekends. I strive to be an honest narrator in relaying our story. I believe my wife would concur with most of what I've shared, though she might offer more context about our historical conflicts over sex, especially our challenges during vacations. This understanding of each other's perspectives continues to be crucial as we navigate our relationship. My wife's concerns about intimacy during vacations stemmed from the fact that our children or other adults, when we shared accommodations like Airbnbs with friends, were usually in close proximity. She worried about the embarrassment if we were overheard, which is a perfectly reasonable fear. After discussing it, I agreed to hold back on initiating anything during vacations unless she felt comfortable doing so, which she sometimes does. Despite this resolution, she felt my previous complaints about our vacation intimacy came across as ungrateful given our regular intimacy at home, prompting her to recalibrate my expectations to appreciate when sex does happen, making it feel more special. Recently, it seems her withholding sex was intended to underline that same point. Update on our situation: no, this isn't fiction. Last night, we had a meaningful conversation and reconnected intimately, which helped resolve our tensions. I apologized for making her feel valued only for sex, which was never my intention, but my words had suggested otherwise. She expressed regret for how the last date night went, especially after discussing it with her sister, who candidly pointed out that inviting someone else over on a date night wasn't wise. Moving forward, she suggested that our date nights should be exclusively for the two of us, a change I had been considering myself. We also agreed to handle any disagreements directly rather than through text, and to refrain from making grievances about sex a focal point of any dissatisfaction. However, a recent discovery has complicated matters. About a month ago, I defended my wife and our friend against accusations of an affair from online commenters after they spent late hours together. Unfortunately, while unpacking our car, I saw an incoming text on my wife's phone from our friend that was clearly inappropriate. After reluctantly checking her phone, I found a history of deleted messages that confirmed ongoing inappropriate exchanges and secret daytime meetups. This revelation has been deeply unsettling, challenging the trust and understanding I thought we shared. I confronted my wife about the texts, and she confessed to what she described as an emotional affair. She admitted to enjoying the attention from our friend, acknowledging that while she knew he had feelings for her, she found the attention flattering. She's been battling severe depression, she explained, and appreciated having someone else to talk to outside of our marriage. She assured me of her love, emphasizing that the emotional connection did not escalate beyond a single kiss initiated by him, and pointed out that all suggestive texts were from his side. Despite her reassurances, I struggled with the reality of the betrayal, finding it hard to reconcile the person I knew with the action she admitted to. This revelation shook the foundation of trust I thought was unbreakable between us. 2 days following this confrontation, my wife and I had a deep and honest discussion. To my relief, her account of the events and her remorse appeared genuine, and the details aligned with the version of events shared by both the former friend, whom I'll call Rick, and corroborated by her sister, who regards me as a brother and has always been trustworthy. Rick, who has been experiencing marital difficulties for some time, had increasingly turned to my wife for emotional support about 6 months ago. Initially, their conversations were sporadic and strictly platonic. However, as his marriage deteriorated, their interactions became more frequent and intimate, evolving into what she perceived as a supportive friendship. My wife's sister had previously warned her about Rick's growing attachment, sensing that his feelings were becoming more profound. Despite these warnings, my wife remained convinced they were just friends until the date night incident, which in hindsight made her realize he might have deeper feelings. Acknowledging the poor judgment shown on that date night, my wife expressed regret, especially about how her actions appeared to others. Since then, she has taken steps to rectify her behavior by significantly reducing her alcohol intake and curtailing her interactions with Rick. This has brought some peace to our relationship as we navigate this challenging period with renewed communication and understanding. About 6 weeks ago, we joined 5 other families, including Rick and his wife, for a ski trip. It was a difficult time for Rick. He and his wife argued frequently throughout the trip. One evening, after a particularly rough day, Rick, quite intoxicated, asked my wife to meet him at the hotel bar under the pretense of needing someone to talk to. There, he confessed his feelings to her, expressing regret over his choice of spouse and wishing he had married her instead. My wife responded with a simple, "I'm sorry," attempting to deflect the situation. Unbeknownst to them, I arrived shortly after this exchange, feeling the tension but unaware of the specifics. My wife later admitted that she withheld the truth during the trip to avoid drama and potential conflict among our friends. Rick's behavior normalized briefly, leading my wife to believe his confession was just a result of his drunken state. However, Rick's marital problems escalated about a month later, indicating a likely divorce. Around the same time, my wife entered a depressive phase triggered by family-related issues, coinciding with a demanding period at work for me as I launched a new division, necessitating long hours. Feeling isolated, Rick began calling my wife daily, and they started having lunch together once or twice a week. Although most of their interactions revolved around life discussions, Rick occasionally made inappropriate comments, complimenting her looks in ways that crossed boundaries. He also sent her suggestive texts during his bouts of drinking, which she insists she ignored. The incident where Rick kissed her occurred at our home. I had momentarily stepped away to the bathroom. When I confronted her about not distancing herself or informing me, she confessed that she enjoyed the attention and was hesitant to cause upheaval within our circle of friends. She laughed off any suggestion of a physical affair, noting Rick's physical appearance as a significant mismatch to her preferences. In her view, her interactions with him provided a distraction from her depression and my absence due to work commitments. My wife acknowledges the mistakes she made and has committed to several actions to prevent any recurrence in the future. However, I still grapple with understanding her decisions during this period. For instance, when Rick suggested a highly inappropriate encounter and she redirected him to a public lunch instead, I saw it as fanning the flames. Continuing engagement when cutting off would seem wiser. Yet she believed she was diffusing the situation by moving it to a neutral public setting. She explained that once she recognized his feelings, she made efforts to keep their meetings in public spaces, even if he visited our home a couple of times during the day. It stings to read texts where she turned him down for a lunch date because I was working from home, her tone conveying disappointment. In response to all that has transpired, we've decided to start couples therapy, and she is also beginning individual therapy to better manage her issues independently. Additionally, she's taken up part-time work to occupy her time constructively. We've agreed it's not feasible to cut Rick out entirely, but now any communication he has with my wife will include me. I've also recognized the need to be more emotionally available. Despite the pressures of work, I've assured her that she can reach out to me anytime, particularly during her depressive episodes, stressing that her mental health is a priority over my job. I'm committed to cultivating a more positive demeanor. I've been rather downcast due to work stress recently, a shift from my typically upbeat nature, which is one of the traits she loves most about me. Admitting my own faults and our recent troubles, I understand I'm not without blame, though I would never consider betraying our relationship. Some might view my approach as too accommodating, but my wife truly is an extraordinary person. Her vibrant and magnetic personality makes her the center of any social gathering, and her intellect is as striking as her beauty. She excels as a mother and is my closest companion, and when she dresses up, she has a presence that captivates any room, reminiscent yet surpassing Isla Fisher's character in Wedding Crashers, in both charm and appearance. Understanding why Rick was drawn to her is easy, but it's his actions that are inexcusable. Despite the complexities of the situation, my wife's genuine remorse and willingness to mend our relationship reassures me that fighting for our marriage is the right decision. She's too remarkable and our bond too strong to not attempt to overcome this challenge together. I'll be providing another update in a few months, hoping to share more positive news. Update 3, August 15th, 2024. To recap, earlier this year, I shared a post expressing my frustration over my wife inviting my then best friend Rick over on what was supposed to be a romantic date night. Many respondents speculated they were having an affair, which I initially denied. Unfortunately, I later discovered that they were indeed engaged in an emotional affair. Since my last update, the journey has been tumultuous, but I'm pleased to report that my wife and I are currently in a strong and reconciled place. However, it hasn't been without its dramatic moments. After deciding to cut off contact with Rick, he unexpectedly reached out to my wife during a game night with friends, emotionally distressed and threatening self-harm. Concerned for his safety, my wife spoke with him for several hours that night. His subsequent constant texting and calls forced us to sever ties once again. Additionally, we encountered Rick at a social event where he was visibly distressed, isolating himself and consuming a significant amount of alcohol. During this event, he confided in me about his intentions to disclose the affair publicly in an attempt to disrupt everything. My wife and I managed to persuade him not to expose the affair. In a more startling revelation, Rick confessed his feelings to my wife, asking her to leave me, promising to wait for her as long as necessary, even if it took 15 years. Amidst all this, Rick has developed an infatuation with my wife's sister, who bears a strong resemblance to my wife. The revelation of the affair was a harsh wake-up call, but it catalyzed necessary discussions between my wife and me. We've significantly improved our communication and addressed most of the underlying issues that had driven her to seek emotional support outside our marriage. While I wish I could erase the affair from our history and I'm uncertain if I'll ever fully trust someone again, paradoxically, it has, in some ways, strengthened our relationship. In the online discussions about our situation, one user expressed concern that Rick might not genuinely be interested in my sister-in-law, Sil, and could simply be using her to maintain proximity to my wife. It's a troubling thought, but possible given his behavior. Before any of this came to light, they were already friends and complicating matters further. His daughter is best friends with our daughter, weaving him tightly into our social fabric. My Sil, who foresaw potential issues with Rick, had warned my wife about him early on, suggesting he might cause trouble. I'm grateful for my Sil's insight and support. She's been a steadfast ally to me. She seems to be engaging with Rick, at least in part, to divert his attention from my wife. My wife, meanwhile, has grown increasingly exasperated with Rick. She's expressed her frustration multiple times, wishing he would just disappear from our lives. She was even reluctant to speak to him during his recent mental health crisis, but I felt it necessary given the urgency of his message to me. That night, Rick spent much of the call crying in his car. In hindsight, I realized I should have perhaps directed him to professional emergency services or taken the call myself instead of involving my wife, given his deteriorated mental state. His recent actions are a departure from the man I've known for years, suggesting a profound mental health crisis that likely requires professional intervention and possibly medication. On August 21st, 2024, I shared another update in what has become an ongoing saga in my personal life. Many people responded with concern, surprise, or dismay at the news of my SIL frequently meeting up with Rick. These reactions are understandable. Feeling the need to clarify the nature of their relationship, my wife and I decided to reach out to my SIL to discuss the situation directly. Reaching out to my sister-in-law, CL, proved insightful as Rick's behavior continues to escalate in bizarre ways. He and my SIL have met several times, often for casual coffee or drinks, but the most recent, and likely last, gathering occurred at Rick's house. With his wife and daughter away, he found himself alone and invited my SIL over. During this meeting, he shared a peculiar belief with her. He felt that in past lives, he was married to both my wife and my CL, and he expressed joy at being reunited with them in this life. Rick's actions escalated when he complimented my SIL's beauty and touched her face in a manner that seemed far too intimate for a platonic friendship. This understandably alarmed my SIL, who confronted him directly, telling him his behavior was inappropriate and that his misinterpretation of friendly gestures as romantic interest needed to stop. She criticized him for repeating the behavior he had directed at my wife, emphasizing the inappropriateness of his actions. After setting these boundaries, my SIL left and has since ceased all communication with him, effectively ghosting him despite his numerous attempts to reach out. She reiterated to us that her intentions were purely platonic and that she harbored no romantic feelings towards Rick. This situation has left me reflecting on the Rick I thought I knew, realizing he might be vastly different from the person he's presenting now. This drastic change in behavior makes me question whether a deeper medical issue might be at play, as some online commentators have suggested, including the possibility of a mental health crisis or even a neurological condition like a tumor. Online community members have voiced their opinions, with one suggesting that the erratic changes in Rick's personality could be symptomatic of a significant medical issue. Another community member stressed the importance of keeping my Sil away from Rick, citing his apparent instability. Additionally, there's growing concern over the secrecy surrounding these developments, particularly why the critique I received was stark but fair. Someone pointed out that by not informing Rick's wife about the affair, I inadvertently became an accomplice to it. This realization struck a chord. Part of me regrets not disclosing the truth when I first discovered it. My wife convinced me not to, fearing the repercussions for our family's social life. Rick's daughter is a close friend of our own daughter, and revealing the affair could potentially ruin that friendship and ostracize my wife, and by extension, our children, from our wider circle of friends. This is a significant concern for me. The potential fallout could be deeply harmful to my children, affecting their social connections and emotional well-being. However, there are moments when I feel compelled to disregard these potential consequences and come clean to Rick's wife, driven by a desire to do what seems morally right. A commenter, UXL411, called this a choice between the lesser of two evils, While they didn't fully agree with my decision, they understood the dilemma. They also warned about the dangers of keeping secrets, likening it to leaving a band-aid on a wound too long, causing further infection. This analogy captures my fear that delaying the inevitable disclosure might only worsen the situation when the truth eventually emerges. I hold on to a semblance of solace knowing that the affair was not physical. Had it been, I would have felt compelled to inform Rick's wife immediately. Still, the burden of this secret weighs heavily, and I occasionally wonder if the cost of protecting my children's current happiness is too high a price for my own peace of mind.